So I want to start by congratulating the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment and in general the government of Zambia for launching the National Adaptation Plan. It is great that we are seeing this, and I know that this is not the end of the road. Rather, this is the beginning of the road. And then we need to make sure that we, together in partnership, can help to implement this National Adaptation Plan for the well-being of all people in Zambia. So today is a very exciting agenda, the one that we have ahead of us, because Zambia is one of those countries where CGIAR has been doing many, many things. And it's an excellent way of learning how these different tools that CGIAR has been developing are really are fit for purpose to help in terms of implementation these policies, including the National Adaptation Plan, but other strategies that Zambia is heading to. So you are going to be listening from the different things that we are working together in terms of informing these policies. I want to highlight, and this is something that I said already at the Zambia Pavilion, but it's true, so I wanted to highlight it in this event as well, which is the quality of the people in Zambia working in the different units of the government, including the Zambia Meteorological Department. It's a total pleasure to work with you, and I want to emphasize that because, as I just said in that event in the Zambia Pavilion, it's fertile soiled to see things growing in relation to how research, how knowledge can be translated into action into the country. So we feel very honored to have the opportunity to work with the government, with the Meteorological Office in this agenda. So I just want to highlight that because I'm really impressed by the quality of the institutions in Zambia and how we have been able really to connect to make this agenda happen. There are many things that have been happening in relation to the Climate Resilience Initiative of the CGIAR that we have been implementing. Many launches that have happened recently. In October, we had the opportunity to launch the Climate Smart Governance Dashboard. And we believe that this is a relevant tool that was co-generating with Zambian organizations and that can help the government to really understand which are the projects that are being implemented, all the way from the national to the local level, trying to understand which are the gaps in relation to these projects, and trying to use it for planning and for investment targeting in order to build this resilience. So we are very, very happy that we already had the opportunity to launch this dashboard, but we are more happy because we believe that we can continue working in terms of implementing and use this dashboard. I want to reiterate that a lot of the tools that we have developed, not only in Zambia, but in the other countries, the tools by themselves, they are useless. So they become relevant when we are able to tailor to the needs of the different institutions in the different countries, and when we see that they are really relevant for decision-making processes. And this is what the opportunity that we see in Zambia. I want to reiterate another one of the tools, and Rebecca is going to be talking about that, but it's a tool that we believe that it's very relevant, that can contribute to the implementation of plans in Zambia, which is the Integrated Future Estimator for Emissions and Diets, which can help to do a lot of analysis in terms of providing scenarios on how under different climate extremes, which is something that we are living with, in different climate extremes, what are the best policy options for responding better and for preparing better to these climate extremes. This is an incredibly important topic because we know that food and nutrition security are very much related with climate challenges, especially climate extremes. So I'm very happy to see that we are going to have a conversation in relation to this. I just want to finish by thanking all the panelists, thanking James for facilitating this discussion, and thanking all the audience, the one that is here and the one that is online, for contributing to this discussion. Please have an open conversation. That's what I would like to get out from this event. I would like to see how we can do more, how the CGIAR can do more through different initiatives that are taking place in Zambia. And Zambia is right now a very interesting country for the CGIAR. You have seen a lot of action in terms of CGIAR centers participating through different ways. And again, reiterate that this is happening because we see a lot of opportunities. So, but I want to hear from you, especially from the from people that are working in the government, what is missing? How can we work better? What are the type of partnerships that you see in the future that can help you in terms of implementing relevant plans and strategies for the future in Zambia? So just let me finish by saying that I look forward to continuing the collaboration. We are in Zambia to stay. Again, we see a lot of opportunity, and we want to contribute to achieving the National Adaptation Plan, the Vision 2030, very important. And also, I'd like to emphasize that through building this climate resilience, we are sure that we can contribute to promote Zambia's economic growth and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna Maria. It's a really inspiring overview. So what I'm going to suggest now is we have 5 panelists, maybe get 2 rounds of questions, and then see if we can sort of engage with the audience as well. What I'd say to the audience online is please leave your comments, your questions in the chat, so that we have the UNFCCC team who's going to pick up and give us a sort of a summary of the questions that are coming in. Maybe the first question is like digging in a little bit into the situation in Zambia, and then maybe the second question sort of examining that a little bit further in more detail. So Edson Conde, in October of this year, the Zambia Meteorological Department released the seasonal rainfall forecast for 2023-2024. Can you tell us how El Nino is projected to impact the seasonal rainfall, and what could this mean for Zambia's smallholder farmers?
Well, thank you very much. So the seasonal rainfall forecast is one of the products or information that we generate in Zambia, and we generate this information at the beginning of or by the end of September. Because our rainfall season, which most smallholder farmers depend on, is between October from one year to the next year, March, April. So how rainfall performs during the season, the information is really very critical for farmers to plan and know exactly how they are going to undertake their farming activities. So during this year, our rainfall will be predominantly influenced by what is happening, the El Nino phenomena. And generally what we tend to see in Zambia is that we have erratic rainfall, especially over the southern half of the country. So we tend to have below average rainfall, but also we tend to have very high temperatures. And that's the pattern we are seeing now. We have seen that, for example, there are delays in terms of rainfall. Even in places where we have started the season, we have had the first rains, that has been followed by very long dry spells. And so those are the issues that we've packaged and informed our farmers in terms of how do they use that information also to make plans. So, and because of that, we are saying that there might be an effect in terms of the yields, crop yields, because our staple crop that we generally do, that most farmers do, is maize. And that one, because of the erratic rainfall and because of the high temperatures, all those things I think will combine to have an effect in terms of reduced yields. But I think, so for us, we're trying to provide as much information as possible. And we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Agriculture Extension Services, where we are sharing, giving advisories to the farmers, what crops should they consider in certain areas, what crops should they consider to grow, and what activities, agricultural activities, can they do informed by what we are projecting to happen in terms of the rainfall pattern. Yes.
Thank you. So you're talking about, when you're talking about changing climate, I guess there's also impacts on water, because it's the water that's affecting the yields. And that brings me over to Dr. Nawa. Dr. Nawa, how has the Global Water Partnership contributed to the development of Zambia's NAP? And how will the Global Water Partnership support its implementation? And bearing in mind some of the challenges that that Mr. Konde pointed out.
Thank you so much. So first of all, just to mention to say Global Water Partnership is the official delivery partner for the NAP under the GCF Readiness Project. So first of all, the process started way back when developing the readiness proposal. Global Water Partnership was actively involved in supporting the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources then, and also the NDA, Ministry of National Development Planning. So in doing so, a number of activities happened, support in developing the concept notes, capacity building, knowledge management, and many other aspects. So we find that as GWP, even the NAP process, we've engaged a number of stakeholders. I think one key issue which I see as a positive aspect of the NAP process in Zambia is that the process has been very consultative for different stakeholders in terms of the variety, government departments and ministries, civil society organizations, the private sector. And apart from that, we've also seen the process being done from national level, provincial, and even officers from the district level. So in this process, we've also, and one of the issues which we are doing now as Global Water Partnership is support the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment in developing the resource mobilization strategy, which is being done right now. So a call went out for proposals, and the consultant was identified, who are now developing the same. So the resource mobilization strategy comes also with the implementation roadmap for not only the NAP, but also for the Zambia Water Investment Program. So I think that's how we are trying to support the NAP process in Zambia as Global Water Partnership.
And will that resource mobilization plan, just a quick question, will that sort of provide resources for partners, if you like, along the value chain?
Yes, so I think those aspects are being developed by the consultant. And also, I think on the other part, you touched on in terms of the aspect of agriculture. I think the NAP process in Zambia is actually in two phases. The first phase, we have the overarching NAP, which is like the overall, which looks at all the sectors in Zambia. So we have 9 sectors, mining, tourism, infrastructure, health, water, and agriculture being part of it. So the agriculture sector is adequately covered in the NAP. And apart from that, when we come to the second phase of the NAP, which will now be the water sector NAP, agriculture will also be covered. I think, as we all know, water is a cross-cutting issue. So definitely aspects of agriculture will be adequately covered. So that's how, as Global Water Partnership, we are supporting the government in that process.
Thanks a lot. Now, let me go over that now to Paul Nyambe. Paul, what are some of the challenges that smallholder farmers are facing in the southern province due to climate change? Sorry.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm coming from the Ministry of Agriculture and Southern Province in Zambia. And that is a province which has for many years been known to be the breadbasket of the country. I'm sure Director Konde there and a few colleagues from Zambia, even from our partners, that is the flag that we carried. And in the recent past years, there's been quite a lot of talk of climate change. I think it was something that we really didn't realize that it will reach the levels it has reached right now. And I'm sure, riding on what Director Konda said, this season 2023-2024 is quite unique. We're almost going without serious rains starting until yesterday. You'll be happy to note that at least where I come from in Southern Province, right at the middle of the province in Choma, we had some adequate rainfall. I'm sure planting can start. This is beyond the normal planting time. We plant around November, early November or end of October. It used to be mid of October until some 30, 40 years ago when we started seeing some slight shifts. So what I would really say that the climate change situation, of course, has been quite a challenge, and the more than 483,000 farmers currently on the register who are smallholder farmers, so to say. We have a small cadre of medium scale and commercial farmers, but here we are talking of the 483,000. Apparently in Zambia, the majority of the food, the staple food which we eat, maize, we make shima from maize crop. It is actually produced by smallholder farmers. The commercial farmers, they would grow a variety of crops. If they grow maize, it's for their livestock feeding. So what is happening over the time, this big number of smallholder farmers who entirely depend on rainfall for their production, one season in a year. We are in the lower rainfall region and medium. The good areas of production or rainfall are in the northern part of the country, which was not traditionally a farming area. So most of the farming in the southern part of the country is now being hindered by the challenges of climate change. Of course, there's been quite a lot of efforts, and the government and the partners have been working very, very hard. I think for us as agriculture on the ground, of the partners like WFP, who are apparently here, but the growing season has drastically reduced. I think that is the first key problem. And not only that, rain can start, then immediately you go into a dry spell. Director Konde, me I planted 10 days ago. From the day I planted, it never rained until yesterday. That is 9 days. And I do both horticulture and field crops. For maize, it can survive. But for horticulture, I did a crop called okra. You have to soak it overnight for 24 hours. By the time you are planting, it has pre-germinated. So 9 days after pre-germination, I don't know what will happen. I have to go and replant as I get back. So that is the normal scenario down there. Even the maize, most of the farmers have to replant. So there are dry spells, there's shortened period of the rain season, and that means people have to do more things to try and adapt so that we're a bit more resilient, so that we have enough food production to reduce the food insecurity, which can set in, and there will be quite a lot of challenges for both the households and the country at large. In a nutshell, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So that sort of leads me over to Rebecca, Dr. Rebecca Sarku. Rebecca, can you tell us about some of the integrated future estimator for emissions and diets and methods to enhance food systems resilience? Because I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about what are some of the solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And then maybe if I can go back then to Edson and maybe sort of ask about your challenges, because you've got the window is getting closer in terms of we need more accurate solutions for farmers. But maybe if I could go to Rebecca first. Rebecca, can you tell us about the integrated future estimator for emissions and diets? Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I greet you from the University of Leeds. iFEED is an integrated assessment framework, as Anna Maria introduced earlier on. And iFEED is a framework which explores the future of future possible scenarios on agriculture, crop production, and irrigation. And as earlier colleagues have mentioned, the scenarios that we've built or result outcome of iFEED shows that warming is projected to increase by mid-century by 2050. And it also pertains to precipitation. There's going to be shorter rainfall season. High warm temperatures are going to increase. So this corroborates what my two colleagues have mentioned regarding temperature and rainfall. Now, when we look at the situation, as the earlier panelist said, maize is one of the traditional crops that is eaten in Zambia. You can't have a marriage ceremony without maize in Zambia. Now, with this trend that we have mentioned regarding climate change scenarios in Zambia, the change is going to affect particularly maize yield in Zambia. So that's what iFEED tells us, the result or the outcome of iFEED scenario. Now, I would want to add briefly that the rate of crop failure is also going to increase. So this does not pertain only to maize, but it's also connected to other crops. So at this point, what I will respond to your question, James, is that iFEED gives us a possible future scenarios by 2015 and what colleagues are telling us about the evidence on the ground. So my two colleagues have mentioned what is happening now, and iFEED is giving us even a bigger future picture of what is going to happen in the future trend. So I'll stop now and we'll continue with the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that takes me over to Sabrina Rose from CGIAR. Sabrina, can you give me a sense of how does climate science contribute to the goals of the national adaptation? How is it filling the gaps in some of the challenges that we've heard faced by smallholder farmers?
Thank you, James. So I'll speak a little bit about what the CGIAR Initiative on Climate Resilience, CLIMER, is doing so far in line with the NAP and in line with the challenges that the panelists have already shared so far. So we've already identified some of the risks. We already see that drought is a major risk in terms of erratic rainfall and really the amount of data available to complement what, for example, the Zambia Meteorological Department is providing in terms of monitoring drought risks. So one of the innovations that CLIMER is working on is the Zambia Drought Management System, which pulls together different satellite-based data to be able to inform and monitor droughts and to be able to support, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture in terms of developing contingency plans, what to do in the case of droughts. And through that Zambia Drought Management System, we've been able to produce various maps and bulletins as well to then see across various provinces, where are those drought risks happening. And again, I want to emphasize how important it is that this work complements the work of the Met Department, because there are data gaps, there are challenges in terms of the information and the accuracy of the data, because rainfall may be happening in one end of the same province but not the other, and you have to have that downscale data. So we see the Zambia Drought Management System as a tool that can support that and is in line with the NAP, which is really also looking at strengthening early warning systems and mechanisms for dealing with drought. I would say in addition to that, there are other innovations, for example, like the Climate Security Observatory. That's one topic that is a bit niche in looking at the relationships between climate and peace. And these are really emphasizing the social dimensions of the climate crisis and how it unfolds in the agriculture sector. And so the Climate Security Observatory has country-specific data, including for Zambia, on how climate and the agriculture sector can end up also having some risks related to conflict and related to peace. And we've been able to work with various community groups to identify what are those climate security concerns at the local level and what are the solutions that the community wants to put forth to address them so that they're actually relevant for that context. And we've seen that the Climate Security Observatory has been useful in collating some of these analyses and developing policy briefs. And even in the NAP, we saw that the Alliance of Bioversity and CIAT, part of CLIMER, part of the CGIAR Center, was able to inform the NAP. So we see that this is an opportunity, again, to complement what's happening on the ground and to strengthen implementation with the data, the information that decision makers need to inform implementation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. So, I thought when I could come to you, Edson, the question that was suggested to me is for you to discuss the challenges that you're facing in your work now in responding to the needs of smallholder farmers and providing accurate and timely information. Maybe to change that a little bit and say, what are the challenges, and then where are the areas where you're not getting support? So some of the challenges, and you're working with partners and they're helping you overcome those challenges, and then some of them are maybe gaps that are missing, that are not being covered. So maybe if you could maybe touch upon both of those.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the meteorological value chain starts with data. We need to have a lot of data for us to provide information that is that speaks to the needs of, for example, smallholder farmers. But also we need to have information about the smallholder farmers. What is impacting them? How do they receive our information? How do they use our information? So that's what we are looking at. So in terms of our data, we run a station network of observation stations, and that's the source of all our data. It's not adequate. We are in the process, we are getting a lot of support. For example, we have support from the World Bank, where we are trying to set up observation stations in all our districts. But that's not enough, considering how big our districts are and how things like rainfall vary. Spatial variation of rainfall is quite high, especially in the southern half of the country. So for us to capture that, we need to increase the density of our stations. So one aspect, we are receiving support to increase our station network. We are also working with the Ministry of Agriculture and other partners, WFP, UNDP, so that we increase the station network for rainfall stations, because that is a very critical component also for water, but for agriculture as well. So those are the gaps that exist in terms of our data collection. We are also, like Sabrina said, trying to incorporate other proxy data sets like satellite, so that we understand exactly what is happening on the ground and we provide location-tailored information. So that's on the other hand, on one hand. The other hand is now that data we've collected, we have that data, how do we make sense of it? How do we generate information that is now tailored that can support the smallholder farmers? So that requires capacity, and some aspect is being addressed. I think the work that we are doing with Climber, as well as another CGIAR project called ICRA, where we're trying to build some capacity, but it's not enough. I think we need to do more to have capacity within the Met department, so that we can tailor information, we can produce sector-tailored information and location-specific information, because that is what is needed on the ground. And then the other aspect, the third aspect, is to ensure that that information, when we generate it, reaches the users, the smallholder farmers. What platforms can we implement so that we can reach all those farmers? It's a challenge in two ways, in the sense that, for example, we use radio, we use other channels, social media channels to disseminate our information, but not all our farmers can access these platforms. And so that's a challenge. How do we ensure that the information that we generate reaches the farmers? But also, for us to generate information that is tailored for their needs, we need to understand their needs. So channels to get feedback in terms of how do they want this information packaged, how are they going to use it, is very critical for us. So those are some of the gaps that we are looking at. How do we address them? Of course, with partnerships. We have started these partnerships, both internally as government, for example, with the work we are doing with the Ministry of Agriculture, where we are training the extension service workers so that they understand the climate information, because that's also very important for them to share and guide the farmers adequately. They need to understand the information. So we are discussing with them. We've trained a number of extension service workers, but we need to do more. Out of the camps, I think about 2,000 or so camps, agricultural camps, we've trained so far 200. But that training also needs to be continuous. It's not just a one-off training. So those are some of the aspects, I think, that where the gaps exist, and where we are trying to partner with people, with other organizations and other partners, so that we address those gaps. So the gaps from data collection, expanding and modernizing our observation infrastructure, to ensuring that we are able to model that information to make sense for the farmers, and ensuring that that information reaches the farmers and it's in a format that is usable and understandable.
That's super interesting because gaps there are. Some of those gaps have been met in terms of partnerships, other players, training, and one of the other issues, Dr. Nawa, is also around capacity development, right, and coordination. And coordination is critical in this in developing multi-sectoral policies. How does the Global Water Partnership support the Zambian government in terms of coordination on NAP's delivery, which touch upon some of the issues that have come up in the conversation?
Thank you, James. So I think first of all, the National Adaptation Plan in Zambia has one of the objectives being strengthening the institutional coordination mechanisms. And so in trying to achieve that, I think Global Water Partnership in supporting the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment has engaged various stakeholders, like I had mentioned earlier, and also to ensure that coordination mechanisms at all levels are taken care of. So for instance, there was a training program for all sector leads to ensure that people really appreciate the challenges going on and also how best that can be done. So we had, for instance, the horizontal coordination whereby from all the various sectors up to the central point, and also the vertical coordination just from the local level, the ward level, up to national level. So the training program, I think, helped very much in trying to ensure that all the sector leads and stakeholders appreciate that. Excuse me. So I think apart from that, Global Water Partnership also believes that in the second phase of our NAP process, which is the water NAP, we'll be able to build upon what would have left out in the first phase.
Are there any sort of successes that you're seeing coming through already? Some space where you think, yep, I can see the challenges, but I can also see where we've moved a little bit forward in this terms of improving the coordination and the delivering and connecting to the other parts, if you like, of the value chain?
Yes, I think the successes have been there, and even the communication channels, I think, have been better along the way. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me over to you, Paul. How is the ministry, so we talked about interdepartmental coordination, but now in terms of coordination, the ministry is partnering with the World Food Programme. How is that working, and where are the challenges? And maybe more importantly for this conversation, what are you seeing coming out in terms of building resilience?
Thank you so much, moderator, for that opportunity again to say something. Southern Province, I think to ride on what Director Konde has said, there's 15 districts. We have 333 camps. The country has more than 2,200 camps. And those camps are the people who are in the forefront, if you like, the foot soldiers, who actually deliver extension messages to deal with both crop production and other services, including climate services. So World Food Programme has come on board since about 2014. We had a project which started in Pemba district called the Disaster Risk Reduction Project, or we just call it the RFO. They had a number of components on which it was based. So what we are saying that through that project, they have trained rain gauge minders, so that as the meteorological development are going around planting these rain gauges and automated weather stations. I know those who have not much access to use the information there and then, it's for use in the future. But for the rain gauges, we are able to translate some information which we can share to the communities. Sharing, of course, dissemination has not been easy. Using the radio station, for our extension officers, they may not access them easily. We have to get back the information to the meteorological department people. And that is being facilitated by WFP. They have to facilitate that channel of how do you communicate the information so it's disseminated through radio stations. If it was possible, we have local TV stations. I think that has been our outcry. We need information to be given to the people. Radio stations are there, but the TV is more attractive. Once there is local news or the national news is coming, you have more information coming. Now we are lucky, it's also being translated into local languages. And Tonga, the language where the farmers I serve are, there are some translated materials which can be shared unto them. But what we are saying that through that promotion by World Food Programme, they have also promoted resilient crops, some of them were almost being shelved off, like sorghum, which does a little bit more resilience as compared to maize. When you have reduced rainfall, you're going to sorghum and millets. You do cowpeas. Those are legumes, which can also help with nutrition balancing. So those can grow a little bit faster and they're more resilient. And now they've also come up with an aggregation system where the market actually can help also promote some products. The school feeding program and the World Food Program, they target certain disadvantaged communities where the children actually can feed. So the farmers grow these cowpeas, which are given to the children at school. The meals are prepared at school. A little bit of the maize, which farmers can do on their own, and then the promoted value chain crops like cowpeas, they are added to the meal. And that gives them quite a lot of an alert mind. They can learn better. They get attracted to go to school. So those are the assignments which WP has been working around with government, in addition to promoting climate smart agriculture. A range of technologies which we are looking at, including land preparation early enough so that you reap the land, and that way you don't disturb the soil, you reduce the amount of rainfall of the water, you actually make a small irrigation canal in the field. We would have loved to go to bigger things, maybe bigger dams, bigger stations to capture the climate situation and interpret it and even give it a bit faster to the people. So in short, we have quite a lot of expectation, and we know World Food Program may be with us for some time. So we hope the partners can be supportive, both Meteorological Department and also the Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
So if I can summarize a little bit, you're essentially saying, so it's the mix of the emergency with the resilience building, putting in the infrastructure, improving the cropping conditions and the climate information.
And marketing.
And the marketing.
Yeah.
That sort of leads me over, I think, to maybe if I can get a question back to you, Dr. Rebecca Sarku. Drawing on your research conducted in Zambia, what are the key findings that you're seeing from the iFEED, and how can that sort of feed into some of the challenges and some of the other big programs which would have been spoken about here? Rebecca.
Thank you very much, James. As I mentioned, iFEED is not to provide information about the climate change policy challenges, but iFEED provides solutions that are relevant for policy, that are relevant to enhance the resilience of communities. So I would ask your questions by saying that during from our results, we've seen that with the increasing trend of temperature and shortening of rainfall seasons and so on, without adaptation, it will be very difficult for communities to enhance their resilience. And this is not only about smallholder farmers, it's also about the wider Zambia population. So we've seen that investment in new crop variety is very relevant. And not only drought-resistant variety, we're talking about varieties that are suitable for the short season and also can also withstand the high temperatures. Paul mentioned something about irrigation. Without irrigation, the possibilities of even the new crop varieties to withstand the increasing temperature is also very low. So there's a need for irrigation to ensure the resilience of the new crop varieties. iFEED results shows that if irrigation is integrated with the introduction of new crop varieties that are drought resistant, that are also keep pace with the heat or the high temperatures and the short rainy season, the possibility of crops to withstand climate stress is about 90%. Now, I want to talk about expansion of agricultural areas. Seeing the situation this way, one would ask, so what should we do? Should we expand crop production to other areas? If that option is followed, then we also run into challenges of biodiversity loss and greenhouse emission. So if research output shows that it is rather relevant for us to look at the already established farm blocks and where we could intensify production of agriculture, in this case, supporting farmers with soil health and good soil health practices, supplementing production with agricultural inputs, climate smart, adoption of climate smart farming strategies. Now, I want to also add briefly that it's not only about maize, because as I mentioned in my earlier intervention, the reliance on maize is also not good to strengthen the resilience of farmers and then the wider Zambian population. So there's also opportunities for stakeholders to expand production beyond the maize production to look at vegetables, the horticultural sector, and diversification of crops. So here I can mention that if farmers are encouraged to delve into other crop production, such as leafy vegetables, which it will be very relevant in enhancing the nutrition of the wider Zambian population. That is some of the immediate results that we are getting and the scenarios that iFEED is providing towards climate smart nutrition in Zambia.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank you a
very
lot.
much.
You know, at the beginning of this conversation, Anna Maria asked me to make it a conversation. So you've all given a varied number of responses. So what I'd like to do now is call out to the audience. If there are any questions, any comments, any requests, and maybe if there's is there anything coming in from online? Nothing yet. So let's see if someone's and if you could say who you are and what organization you represent when you speak. Have we got a speaker?
I hope you can hear me now. Okay. So thank you to all our panelists. My name is Ramdan. I work for the United Nations University. My question is related to the adoption of climate smart technologies, maybe to Mr. Nyambe or Ms. Sarko. You have not seen that you mentioned some potential barriers, some related to the financial aspect, some to data gaps that you don't necessarily know the needs of the farmers. But I was wondering if there are also barriers related to social norms that could potentially prevent farmers from adopting some of the climate smart solutions that are developed.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Maybe I've not got all of it very well. Social norms, which would do kind of inhibit the adoption of certain practices, will be quite limited. This is a province which is, if you like, is multinational. Southern province is cosmopolitan to some extent. You know, we also have the biggest tourist town there, Livingstone. So you see, not a very difficult kind of people that we're dealing with. I think what comes very clear is that generally everyone feels that they are farmers. Even us who work for the government, even those that work in private sector, they have the desire to farm because of the traditions and the setup around there. What just creates the current challenge that we're going through is just the climate change, and very vigorously, so to say. We've lost the production base because we've been practicing, of course, so much of artificial fertilizer applications, and that brings in the picture of agroecology. We need to look at all these areas to try and moderate the way we farm. So the people are farming, they're outgoing farmers, except they're at small scale. They have not invested heavily on infrastructure, mechanization, even value chain, small mechanization or small pieces of equipment, which can help us improve on the way we keep our produce so that it can have a bit of value rather than selling it raw. So generally, it's just a lack of investment in infrastructure, even the road network, but more to do with machinery at that level where you can easily prepare your land in good time, conserve enough moisture, or even harvest it in a dam, or even weirs. So generally, it's a farming region. The culture is quite diverse. I really don't see much of that coming. There could be no problem. Even investors who come into Southern Province, they may have some challenges, but it's not something which can inhibit adoption of the climate smart technologies. Thank you.
And Rebecca.
Yes, so thank you very much for your question. With the adoption of with the social norms, I see, as we mentioned, we talked about the options that are available. For example, farmers could adopt the new crop varieties like the orange maize, which is a pro-vet vitamin variety. And we also have varieties of sweet potato that like the orange flesh sweet potato. But when I visited Zambia and spoke with some stakeholders whom we work with, there's this traditional talk of using the white flesh maize for food production. That is for the local days, that's the shima. So these are some of the traditional norms that may inhibit the adoption of a climate smart solution. But there is a possibility, because when one farmer adopts the innovation and tries it out and works out, this becomes a word of a message or testimony which is spread among other farmers. So talking to some stakeholders, especially the stakeholders who work in the seed sector, they are seeing signs or improvements in the adoption of this new technology. And as Engineer Paul has mentioned, there's also prospects for the adoption of farm practices that can enhance soil nutrient and moisture retention and so on. So yes, definitely in every society, we should expect social norms that would inhibit the adoption of innovation. That will be the starting point. But continual capacity building, using testimony of first-time adopters and so on, there is possibility for increased adoption and to enhance the resilience of crop production and food supply. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rebecca. I just wanted to maybe put the same question to Dr. Nawa, because social norms and gender norms as well may be coming into. So if you have a comment.
Yeah, so just an addition, I think like Mr. Nyambe and also Dr. Saka have rightly put it. I think like the example he gave, it may not really apply in the southern part of the country, like he has explained, but I think we've seen how issues of social norms have really impacted on women. Let me give you an example of women, for instance. So when you have particular training programs going on for climate smart agriculture and even just other programs, usually you'd find that they will say that they need one member of the family per household. And who usually goes in those trainings? The head of the household. So you find that, I mean, we all know that women are the majority in terms of the labor in the agricultural sector. They're the ones who do the most of the work, clearing of the land, planting, harvesting and all that. But when it comes to training programs, sometimes they're left out because of the fact that the head of the household is the one who has to attend the training. So if the heads of household don't impart the knowledge or share the knowledge, it means they're left out. So they will not take part in that simply because of that, the social norms to say the woman has to remain behind and then the head of the household will be able to be the one to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman at the back, and then the lady beside him.
Fantastic. Hi, my name is Cooper. I'm with Indiana University in the U.S. My question is for Sabrina Rose, but other folks on the panel also alluded to it, so anyone else can chime in. You mentioned the maps for the drought management system with satellite data. I was wondering if you could go into the methodology of creating these maps, what software you're using, what you're representing, and then how these maps are being used by the communities. Is there any participatory methods? And if not, would they be useful as well?
Thank you for that excellent question. So I could say that at least for the maps that we've generated, it's definitely been a combination of space-based data using GIS as well to be able to assess where are the droughts happening across the provinces and the severity of those droughts as well. We also use data from the Zambia Met Department and combining that with other data that we've been able to use for other platforms as well to be able to get a full picture of what's happening at the provincial level. And so in terms of how they're being used, and I really like how Director Konde said it before, it's important to take that information and then translate it in a way that is actually usable. And so one way we're doing that is to create drought bulletins to be able to highlight where the droughts are most severe, what actions can be taken, and put that in an accessible format that people can really use and take to make informed decisions. Now, I also really like your point about how are we making it participatory, and I think one of the ways that we started to do that as well with other platforms like, for example, the Early Warning, Early Action, Early Finance platform, which builds on the Zambia Drought Management System. It's really having more like capacity building, sort of collaborative workshops to kind of co-design these tools so that they're more tailored to the needs of the policymakers who are then using that information to make their anticipatory action plans. So, and because these tools are really targeting policymakers, decision makers at more higher scales, really getting their input in terms of the information that's used, how it's translated is important so that these tools are relevant and are delivering information that they can really use to make informed decisions. But I will also want to give another example just of like participatory approaches that we're doing in CLIMER, and one of them is related to ongoing work and that's called an action grant program, and that's really to support locally led adaptation, because if we're talking about participatory approaches, it's really about bringing community members in to have them also be decision makers in these various processes. And so we've had the opportunity in the southern province, specifically in the Manze district, to work with community members there to identify what are the major challenges that they're facing from an adaptation perspective, and then what are the solutions that they want to deploy. And one of the major challenges was access to water. And so we were able to collaborate with the local municipal water authorities, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture in the Manze district to install a solar-powered borehole and be able to provide water access to the community. And so we see there's benefits for almost 1,000 households who are in that community. And that was a participatory approach that we used for the Action Grant Program. And then my final point, which hasn't come up just yet, is really the role of finance. And so if we're talking about delivering adaptation plans and also investments, finance is a key factor. So in doing that grant program, we were able to provide finance directly to the community so that they can fund the activities that they define. And so that, in that sense, it really was locally led. And so I see there's a lot of potential for making sure that finance gets to the local level, and that was just one example of that. Thank you.
Director Konde, did you want to come in for this question?
Yes, probably just to mention, I think the aspect of how we are using the satellite and also our observation data sets, because I think it has been noted that the satellites are not very accurate. They can give us a spatial pattern, but they may not give us exactly what's happening on specific points. And therefore, that's where we are now using our data to try to remove the errors from the satellite data sets so that the information that we produce is appreciably accurate. and we can know exactly what is happening on the ground. So for me, that's the area I think that where the MAID service is coming in very, and also I think there is a collaboration with the University of Columbia, where some of the methods that they've used to blend observation data sets, point observation data sets, and satellite observations, so that we improve or we benefit from both the point data, which cannot give you the spatial pattern, but also the satellite, which is able to give you the spatial pattern in terms of rainfall.
Okay, and the lady, yep. If you could introduce yourself and say which organization you're coming from.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Silosius Chaturuka. I'm from Zimbabwe. Yes. Thank you very much for the panel, what was presented by the panel. I have about 2 or so questions. The first question relates to access to equipment and mechanization, which was mentioned. I'm not sure how it marries with the current advances, which are actually against tillage. So how are we relating that? Because I think from existing literature, we also see that if we till a lot, there is a lot of soil erosion, there is also a lot of greenhouse gas emission that comes out of that. So how are we marrying the two? Then I also want to maybe make an example of what we are doing in Zimbabwe, because we have adopted a farming approach where we are not tilling at all, especially for the smallholder farmers. We are using this whole digging, they put the manure, etc., moving away from the fertilizers that we are saying are harmful to the soil, and etc. So I wanted just to have clarity, because we also want to lessen the burden to the farmers. But how does that marry with the other effects that affect that? Then I think the second comment that I wanted to mention of is maybe if I could just get a summary of the resilient policies that we have actually flagged out in this. Because I'm also from government, I also want to proffer these policies, because at government level, we need policies that will allow us to move forward. So if I could get maybe a summary of the policies. Thank you.
So maybe Paul with the first question, and if somebody else wants to come in on the national adaptation plans and some of the accompanying policies, I'll ask you to put your hands up. So maybe start with you, Paul.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions, Madam. There could be many, but I'll just try to say maybe in brief. Mechanization does not always mean tilling the land. Open completely. You mechanize to open spacings or spaces where you're going to plant. If you look at the tractor reaping system, you do not have to plow the whole field. I know you're talking of the conventional arrangements where we to plow the whole field and then you go in and harrow. That's when you plant. And with the plows, with cattle, you have to plow the whole field several strips around. But now we're talking of reaping the lines that you need to plant through. You can apply manure there, you can also apply lime there, and planting can be very specific. Whether you're going to use a Fitarelli kind of machine, which I think was developed somewhere in Italy, but all we are saying that we have to reduce the land, because if you're going to use a Jabba planter, I know Zimbabwe with Dr. Christian Theofelder under CIMIT, we had a lot of collaboration work. The Jabba planter is good, you can go in and plant, but if you do not make enough soil around to capture some moisture, that does not help you. Once there's a small dry spell, the crop simply dries off, the seed will dry off. So we're talking of reaping using small hand-driven tractors, even walking tractor, of some kind, two-wheel tractors, they increase the efficiency of preparing land. In my province, people plant sometimes 6 to 10 hectares of one crop. There is a bit of land. I know here maybe we have different perspectives. So what we are talking about is people who have been growing huge tracts of land. So to reduce it to the basin where we're using the chakaho or whatever you're going to use, it is something which will increase the labor and you will reduce the efficiency greatly. In Southern Province, that is not suitable. We have worked around all those areas. So what we are really looking at is a mechanization system which does not go into till the whole land. You just open up relevant spacings and just furrows. If you're going to do basins, on small portions of land, you can do basins. Half a hectare maximum. If you have to do a hectare of basins using hand hoes or using the chakaho, that becomes quite labor intensive. And I think the youths and the children will not be attracted to agriculture, and then it will remain an old people's business. And that becomes very inefficient. We need to bring in professionalism, and mechanization is very key, both at land preparation, at planting itself, at management of the weeds. There is talk of the herbicides being very detrimental to the lives of the people. I think the argument and the debate is worldwide. But what we are saying is that we have to find a way to actually combat the weed pressure, which comes by not opening or by not tilling the whole land. And then finally, you bring in mechanization at harvesting and at processing. That will give value, and exports will bring in higher incomes for the farmers, and good nutrition, of course.
Thank you. I can see that Rebecca, I think, Rebecca, you have your hand up. You want to come in? Sorry.
Yes. So I would like to respond to the earlier question on the participatory method. And I want to say that for us in our research with iFEED, we engage experts and policymakers in Zambia. And here I'd like to acknowledge our colleagues in ACF, that is the Agricultural Consultative Forum, and other stakeholders in government offices and NGOs. So what we do as a participatory method, in addition to our modeling work, is we take implication statements from this expert that I've mentioned, and because they work in Zambia, they know the situation on the ground. So as we model our research, we also convene meetings to have a discussion about the results and the scenarios that we have developed. So they give feedback about possible future scenarios, different options, and so on. And another participatory approach that we use in iFEED in responding to policy issues in agriculture and climate change is that at the end of the day, we provide the results to the experts again. Then they discuss, as Paul is mentioned, these are the options that, or the possible policy pathways that could be adopted. Now, I respond to the last, my lady's question that, or what are some of the resilient policies that we have responded to in Zambia? Working with our colleagues in Zambia from different levels, they give ideas about what is actually happening in Zambia in terms of policy and how we could feed our research output into existing policies. So I could mention that currently in Zambia, with the Zambian Comprehensive Agricultural Transformation Support Program, and colleagues who work around some of these policies have been able to integrate iFEED results into the policy to enhance the resilience of the policy. So giving evidence or feeding evidence of research into the policy. I can also mention the biennial review process, which concerns the CADEP and the Malabo principle, which was recently held in Zambia. So these are some of the participatory approaches that we adopt into the iFEED results that contribute to enhancing the resilience of policies and providing evidence for policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we have 11 minutes, the clock is telling me. So what I want to do is maybe come back on some of the things. So first, I'd like to speak to Edson. Edson, what are the Zambia Meteorological Department's priorities for agriculture based on the NAPs, and what sort of support, science support, are you looking for to be able to sort of deliver on those priorities? Because you mentioned a lot of challenges earlier, but what are the ones that are really, you think, that are really priority in this period of the NAPs going forward?
Well, I think for us, if we have information that can be used to support the agriculture sector, but I think it's the delivery of that information. How do people access that information? I think that seems to be one of the challenges that needs to be addressed, and so we've been doing it in several ways by building partnerships with the local communities, but also with the, like I mentioned, with the Ministry of Agriculture, so that we can reach the farmers. But also, some of the things that we are looking at is to try to develop new platforms to improve the accessibility of the information that we generate, but also to ensure that we are getting feedback from the farmers. One thing that we have recently launched is what we are calling the National Framework for Water, Weather and Climate Services, which is a framework that is going to bring researchers, the users and different partners, so that we start co-producing, co-delivering, co-sharing meteorological services or weather and climate services, because I think for us that is also very, very important. If we continue developing or producing this information without taking into account the needs of the people on the ground, then that information might not be usable to the farmers on the ground. So we are trying to strengthen that coordination in terms of how climate services are provided, but also strengthening the aspect of getting feedback from the users. There's one aspect also, a little bit of detail that we are doing, because for us, yes, we collect this information in terms of the weather and the atmosphere, but there's one component that is very critical also, that actually now we are talking with the Ministry of Agriculture to see how we can, when we observe the weather, how do we observe agriculture, for example? Things like just in a camp, in a small location, what is the yield? So that we are able to compare the impacts and understand the impacts of the weather, the climate on yield of different crops. What are people growing in these areas? So those are some of the things that we are trying to...
A clear demand to our research colleagues as well, and to the other organizations for support. Now, speaking of integrating across, how are you and where do you see the opportunities in integrating gender and social equality into this in climate resilient agriculture and water management?
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, so as Global Water Partnership, first of all, we are guided by two of the documents that we have, the gender strategy and also what we are calling the gender action piece. So in those documents, as GWP, we try to ensure that gender is integrated in all the programs that we have and also the ones we support our partners with. For instance, right now we are implementing the Continental Africa Investment Program and also the Water, Climate Development and Gender Program, OCTEBG. So even as we implement those programs, we ensure that gender is not just mainstreamed, but also we take the gender transformative approach, whereby we identify the root causes of gender inequalities in all the contexts that we work with, and also address those inequalities. So we are working with some regional organizations on some WEF projects, water, energy and food projects, where we ensure that women and men have equal opportunities. I think, as we know, climate change is not gender neutral. So men and women will be affected differently by climate change. So we have to ensure that if it's access to resources, whether it's credits, if it's land, they have equal opportunities to access those resources. And in the process, gender is integrated. And I think agriculture sector is one sector where you can't run away from issues of gender and social inclusion. If you have to implement a program without integrating gender, then you will lose it, because you have to just ensure that all the social groups are engaged That way, the program will be very successful in doing that.
Thanks a lot. Now, I'm going to leave. We have 6 minutes left. I'm always telling you how much time we have left because apparently we're very strict on ending. So what I want to bring the last word in to Rebecca and to Sabrina. Maybe I'll start with Sabrina. Sabrina, you listening to all those priorities, some of the successes, some of the strategies are on the way. So how is the work that ClimeBear are doing is supporting the adaptation and making sure that it's locally led, making sure that there's inclusion from the farmers, from a gender perspective, from a local perspective, and even from a scientific perspective, right? Integrating, because this question of inclusion is super important to make sure that things are getting to where they need to go.
Thank you for the question. So I'm really happy to also follow what Dr. Mwale already said, because you mentioned addressing the root causes of vulnerability and transformative approaches, and that's really what climate research aims to do. So we have a social equity cross-cutting theme that cuts across all of the research areas that we do, and it's also really emphasizing what was just shared in terms of how do we first understand what are those root causes of vulnerability, and then design different interventions, provide information that can really address those root causes in the work that we do. So one example is ongoing work that we have to develop social equity markers, so to really assess how is social equity integrated into climate resilient agriculture. And we're developing those based on field work in various locations, and to be able to better measure how social equity is being integrated so that we can see if what we're doing is really inclusive. I already mentioned the case of the work that we're doing in the Manze district in terms of working with community members to understand the various adaptation needs, and then as a result we installed the solar powered borehole to be able to address those community level needs. And then even in the participatory approaches for the models that we're developing and the various innovations in terms of bringing communities together to inform those analyses, not just having analyses that focus on the quantitative aspects, but the qualitative as well. So those are just a few examples, but it really is at the heart of what we do. We feel that transformation, transformative adaptation cannot happen without embedding social equity at the core. So I'm really glad to hear that emphasized on this panel.
Thank you, Sabrina. So I'm going to do this a bit backwards. I'm going to thank everybody for a really interesting discussion, but I'm not going to, the last words are not going to go to me, but they're going to go to Rebecca Sarku. Rebecca, what I'd like to know, how is all of this being translated into policy? How is some of this informing some of the decision making going forward? We've heard a really successful NAPS development, some policies and some impact in the works that our colleagues have been talking about. How is this research being translated in? And I think that's a really, maybe for me, that's a really good way to end the session. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So I think I've responded to a few earlier on, and I talked about the Comprehensive Agriculture Program, which is a second generation NIPE. We've engaged experts and policymakers, and currently we have planned a policy dialogue to discuss the iFEED research results with stakeholders in Zambia. And when I talk about stakeholders, I'm not only talking about stakeholders from agriculture. We are looking at youth groups, farmer associations, producers, and so on. So that also answers the question about how we are going to deal with social norms in terms of adoption of innovation. And we continue to engage with experts for upcoming policies in Zambia. I can mention the agroecology policy, which is currently in formulation by some NGO groups. And our aim is to participate in workshop policy dialogues so that we can make the research known to these groups and also to enhance adoption. I want to also talk about the upcoming Zambia irrigation program, which is also a point where we want to make research results about iFEED known. What are the possible irrigation strategies that could be adopted in view of the climate scenarios that we have generated? So I would say that we are open to provide research output on iFEED to anyone in Zambia. And I would like to end the session by giving a testimony from one of our stakeholders who participated in the workshop. And it says, I write with great joy that our contribution on the second generation agriculture policy recommendations were swiftly and urgently implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture's Farmer Input Support Program 2023-2024 season. As I follow on the biofortified seed on the market, 2 seed companies reported their participation in the program. And I want to appreciate the contribution of iFEED team and the seed system partners. Congratulations. Thank you again, and thank you for the great achievement. Thank you for the time and for inviting us to contribute to this side event. We are grateful.
Thank you, everybody, and I think that brings our time to an end. I'd like to thank everyone who's here who's been speaking and everyone who's been participating in the conversation with the questions and the comments. Thank you. Bye-bye.